the goal behind the podcast is I've really wanted to create a reference library for anyone in the world to access the knowledge and resources in Silicon Valley. I mean, I'm waiting for someone to create this billion-dollar unicorn company and say, hey, your podcast, I learned so much on the journey of listening to those episodes that it helped me create this.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much for attending our podcast today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me as a guest. I'm really excited about our conversation.
Yes, you are my senpai podcaster because you have been doing podcast for 4 years. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you. It's been an incredible journey, and honestly, I recommend it for anyone. I recommend it to start a podcast and see where the journey goes, because it's an amazing adventure for anyone that does it. So I'm excited to see how yours progresses over the years.
So tell us about yourself. What do you do in Silicon Valley, Sean?
So I'm an investment banker. So what I do, for your audience that may not be familiar with investment bankers, I focus on mergers, acquisition, growth capital, and secondaries. So what does that mean? Think of it this way. You go through life, you meet that special someone, you come together, and two people become one. You get married. That's like a merger. And now maybe you're walking hand in hand with your husband or wife in the park, and you see a little puppy, and you go, oh my gosh, I want to bring this puppy into our family. You acquire that puppy through an acquisition. Now that puppy, it needs to go to the vet, it needs shots, it needs food. To go from this little puppy to this big dog, well, to do that, it needs growth capital, it needs money. So all those transactions that happen in life, that's what I do with businesses. I help them with these major transactions to get them from where they are today to where they want to be tomorrow. And that's all I do, is I focus on those types of transactions where there are major transactions in the life cycle of a business, where we go out, we run the processes for them by building out the marketing material, the buyer investor list, having those conversations, negotiate on their behalf, managing due diligence, all these steps that a normal process occurs, we run those. So that's what I do all day long, is I get to work with some of the most incredible companies in the world. And that's the beauty of Silicon Valley, is the people I get to work with, the companies I get to work with. A lot of them, most people won't even know or hear what they're working on until 3, 5, 10 years down the line, because they're so cutting edge, they're so advanced. But at the same time, I also get to work with the more traditional manufacturer and more traditional logistics supply. Because Silicon Valley has a little bit of everything here. You can take a company from nothing to, well, a unicorn, to all over the world. And so I get to work with companies at all stages that have all different types of technology that are, changing the world. So it's an amazing opportunity. And, so that's what I do as an investment banker.
I see, investment banker. So you really like your job.
It's a fun job because all day long I get to talk to CEOs, I get to talk to investors, I get to talk to boards, I get to talk to these decision makers that are trying to change the world. My days are very exciting.
You started Silicon Valley podcast from 2020, right?
Yeah, I think it was about 2020. Maybe, 2020, 2019, definitely around then.
Okay, so is this related to pandemic time? That's why you felt, I have to help society or community like this?
Well, the funny thing is, so I originally had a public access TV show called Silicon Valley Successes. And that came about from working with all these service providers and putting them in contact with companies. So I was, for a long time, helping companies set up operations in tech parks overseas, and companies overseas set up operations in Silicon Valley. And I was making similar intros all the time. Talk to this lawyer, talk to this accountant, talk to this HR, talk to this, all these same people, same conversations. And I thought one day, wow, wouldn't it be fantastic to record kind of an intro session with these people that I'm always referring to. And then when I'm talking to a business, I can say, listen, I think you'd really benefit from talking to these 4 people. Here's an interview I did with these 4 people so you can learn more about them, what they're doing, how they can help. And so I did that. I think we had either 36 or 46, I forget, episodes of it. And I mean, it was fantastic. We were in something like 30 cities in the or public access stations in the US. It caught on. And then from that, I pivoted to a podcast platform where I had a 6-month contract. I did the first 32 episodes there. And that's when the pandemic happened. And when the pandemic happened, I then pivoted, rebranded to the Silicon Valley Podcast. And I did take a little bit of a break because I always like to do my interviews in person. The Zoom is fantastic, or Google Hangouts, and there's so many other platforms for online. But I really enjoy the in-person conversation to build the relationship, to build rapport. And so I took a little bit of a pause because with the pandemic, no one was meeting in person. But then after a few months, I went, you know what? I just got to start this again. And from then till now, I've been pretty consistent with an episode every week, except for when I'm away on business travel or hosting kind of a major event. When something like that happens, all my time allocated from investment banking has to go to one of those events, activities. But other than that, I mean, we've released something like 240 episodes at this point. And I mean, the conversations, if your audience is interested, I've had interviews with the founder of Canva, Square, Intel Capital, Juniper Networks. I've interviewed some consulate generals. The list has it's pretty extensive. The conversations I've gotten to have. I had a conversation with a gentleman, and we were the first interview after his company was announced that they were a unicorn company. This last week, 2 days ago, I interviewed a 4th generation family office in California. So I get to sit down with some of the most incredible people. I even got to interview, now I think about it, one of the original people from Fairchild Semiconductors. That's kind of the foundation of Silicon Valley. He later went to Intel, and you get to hear these stories of the original people where they had, these interactions with Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and all these. I mean, you hear stories about Elon, all these crazy things. A lot of the best ones are off camera. Once we stop recording, those are the real jewels of stories.
I see.
But having the opportunity to sit down with these kind of legends and learn from them. When else do you get the opportunity for some of them to block off an hour and a half of their time where it's just a one-on-one conversation and ask them all the questions that you want to know, and just from their lifetime of experience? So for me, it's kind of my own way of getting the best mentors in the world. But the goal behind the podcast is I've really wanted to create a reference library for anyone in the world to access the knowledge and resources in Silicon Valley. And because of that, I've had some incredible experiences where I'll get an email or a LinkedIn request from people overseas where, I mean, for example, before the Ukraine-Russian war, there was a MBA program in Moscow that used my podcast for their English MBA class. And I got to talk to the class every quarter. They'd bring me in and talk. And at first I was like, this isn't real. Wait, you're trying to say my podcast is used in an MBA program in Moscow? Okay. I've had another MBA program, a gentleman in Cameroon took 10 of my episodes and created an at-home business course with it that he was selling in Cameroon. I've gotten to fly to Wuxi, China to accept an award for the Entrepreneur Innovation Awards for the impact of the podcast on the entrepreneur ecosystem. What I'm trying to say is the podcast has opened up so many doors, and I've gotten to hear from so many people how it's helped them and their business and given them ideas of how to get their startup from where they are today to where they want to be tomorrow. Or I had no idea about mental wellness of founders. I thought I was just in my own world and I was depressed and because of how difficult these things are. But yet I with that interview with Sam Wong or this person that they talked about the ups and downs and the difficulties of the life of an entrepreneur and made them feel better about their journey. And I mean, the list goes on and on. I even had actually a funny story. I had a gentleman from Japan come to an event that I moderated at Plug and Play last year. And he came up to me. He's like, I learned English through your podcast. I listen on the subway every day. I'm like, thank you. And he said he had to, slow the speed down to, half speed. And I'm a pretty slow talker, I think. But I was I felt so good. I mean, anyone that's watching this can see my smile. But just the fact that he came to that event to tell me and then take a picture with me. Because I was like, how'd you even hear about this event? He's like, oh, I came here to meet you. I was like, oh my gosh.
Amazing. So literally you are like helping and then changing someone's life better.
Hope so. I mean, I'm waiting for someone to create this billion-dollar unicorn company and say, hey, your podcast, I learned so much on the journey of listening to those episodes that it helped me create this. So I do know of people that have built businesses on the knowledge of the podcast, but I haven't met anyone that's built that unicorn company yet. So if any of your listeners want to be that first one, that would be great.
So, Shawn, next year is the 5th year, right? To start your
I guess so. If you don't count the TV show and that. So yeah, I guess it will be.
Tell us about your kind of like a milestone or dream in next year. Do you have something?
Ooh, for the podcast, not so much. Just there's definitely some people I've had initial conversations with to interview. So that'll be fun. Most of my podcasts, all my episodes after about episode 30 have been warm introductions from either past guests or a couple of my inbox that say, would you like to interview our CEO? Would you like to interview this person? Would you like to? And the people I have on the wait list for next year, some of them have books coming out. Some of them are releasing a product and they want to be interviewed right before that release. There's a couple things lined up that are going to be very interesting. So that's definitely a positive for next year. So that's one thing that the listeners should be very excited for. Just to let you know in advance, there's some pretty incredible people that are lined up to do interviews before some major events in their life and what they're working on. Other than that, for next year, I want to get a couple more speaking opportunities. I love to do public speaking to audiences. I love moderating panels. I love being on panels, especially when it's around artificial intelligence and investment banking in general, and how that market is changing and the disruptions. And there's so much to talk about. So next year, more speaking opportunities. Hopefully, we have had a little bit of a conversation around taking a small delegation from Silicon Valley into Africa, to Nigeria and some countries. So those we've had just initial conversations. I have no idea if that will happen or not. But it would also be great to somehow take a delegation here to go to Japan and speak to your audience there at a university or a startup conference or whatever it is. So there's so many things that we can explore. I just always see more and more doors open and more opportunities as the conversations get to that higher level, the people I interviewed, the track record. It's incredible when you sit the chain of communication, and it's just crazy how much one thing builds on the other in life.
Amazing. Of course, I believe because of people like you, because you have a great personality, you want to help people. That's why, oh my gosh, I want to introduce my friends to Shawn. That's why you guys are making chain, and then like like what can I say, dot and dot is connecting and making a line. Line is making a, what can I say, kind of.
Oh, a shape.
Yeah,
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 you got the spider web. You
yeah,
have that
yeah.
web of connections. It's incredible.
So
And
beautiful.
actually that's one of the for your listeners that have not been to Silicon Valley, I think that's one of my favorite parts about the community here
Mm.
is just the connections amongst everyone that have such different backgrounds that are focused on so many different things that in just a small little part of the world, you can really have access to any of the resources or any of the knowledge that you want to really grow your business, really to create that dream that you want. But we are going to start holding monthly live podcast recordings.
Oh,
So the next one, I will definitely send you a calendar invite.
so lastly, many people want to reach out to. So which medium is best for you? Like LinkedIn or website?
So for the audience that's watching this video, I have my QR code. That
Hmm.
QR code goes right to my LinkedIn. So if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's the best. I'm on LinkedIn every day.
Yes, since I come from Tokyo, so I do helping many startup conference and events. So I can reach out to the organizers, and then they may want to invite you.
That'd be great. And I have a pretty strong network here in Silicon Valley. So if the opportunity is right, I'm happy to share it with others. And I mean, gosh, you could be the bridge between Japan and Silicon Valley.
Yes. Yeah, you are right. So this is my milestone. And then, especially this year, many AI startups are launching office in Japan.
Ah, so you haven't told me, what's your goal for the podcast?
Great question. So as you mentioned, I would love to become a bridge person between Silicon Valley and Tokyo because unfortunately Japan is lagging behind in software and of course startup ecosystem little by little. Like we want to learn from the US, but
Mhm.
first language barrier and the second Japanese mindset. We have
Oh,
perfection. Perfect. Are we okay? Are we okay? And then launch. So this mindset is not agile. So
yeah.
if we want to launch some software, if we care super perfect, like it spends 1 year or 2 years.
Oh,
But
yeah. And
right?
you don't know if the market wants it or not.
Thank you so much for attending this podcast today, Sean.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Hopefully your audience gets a lot out of it. And I do look forward to continuing the conversation.
Yes, of course. And then please let me know and let us know when you do next your event.
I will.
Yeah.
And I hope everyone attends. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
The three key takeaways from Shawn today. 1. Silicon Valley podcast became a reference library. It is interesting to see how the Silicon Valley podcast serves as a resource hub for aspiring entrepreneurs around the world. Shawn emphasized how his podcast has become a reference library, providing people with the expertise and knowledge they need to grow their entrepreneurial spirit. I liked how Shawn said that his off-mic conversation are almost a gem moment with legendary people. I love it. This is what I am striving for as well. 2. The power of networking and collaboration. Shawn shared the importance of building a network and collaborating with diverse professionals in Silicon Valley. Shawn explains how his interviews and warm introductions from guests helped to create a vast web of connections and foster growth opportunities for both his podcast and his audience. The three, the role of mentorship and sharing stories. Shawn's journey on the Silicon Valley podcast demonstrates the impact of mentorship and storytelling. By interviewing industry leaders and sharing their experience, Shawn provides listeners with valuable insight from mental health to step to building a unicorn company. Shawn's platform, Silicon Valley Podcast, provides entrepreneurs with the wisdom of experienced professionals. Thank you so much for listening our podcast today. We hope our story will help your future and career. Bye bye.